One of the most slept on positions in this NFL draft might be the interior defensive line. I'm talking defensive tackles, I'm talking the big boys. Today, we're going to be giving you guys my top 5 rankings and then a tier list at the end of this video. If you are excited for the NFL draft, you should be really excited for my NFL draft live stream. Round 1, myself and Javon are going live, giving our instant reactions to each and every pick. Make sure you're tapped into the channel for that. Let's get into these interior defensive line rankings. Number 1, I have Caden McDonald out of The Ohio State University. This guy is a throwback nose tackle who is just an absolute dog in the middle of that defense. The physical profile is pretty scary. 6'2", 326 pounds. The hands are 9 3/4 inches. The arms are 32 1/4 inches. This dude is an absolute athletic freak, a real big dude in the middle of a defense, and the stats backed it up, man. 65 tackles, 3 sacks at the nose tackle position is absolutely disgusting. 2 forced fumbles, a nose for knocking the ball out, an 87.7 PFF grade last year at Ohio State. The number one thing that stuck out to me about Caden McDonald was really the amount of double teams that this guy was receiving. And yes, I get it. Caden McDonald, a round 1 talent. We all kind of know that. But on this Ohio State defense with guys like Arvell Reese and Sonny Styles and Caleb Downs and just one of the premier schools in the country. They had won the national championship coming into the year. They beat Texas week 1 and then were ranked the number 1 team. And still consistently, Caden McDonald in the middle of that defense is who opposing offensive coordinators decided to spend their resources on in trying to stop and getting him double teamed. Was it effective? Not really. This guy had a dominating presence on the interior at the nose tackle position. He's just a massive human being overall, but even with 2 guys on him, he was filling his gap, he was dominating the space, he was forcing running backs to go other directions, or quite simply, he was taking them to the ground. This is a player who can come in on your defensive line and make a massive, massive impact. And this goes for all defensive tackles, but McDonald especially. I know that we talk about Arvell Reese. I know that we talk about Sonny Styles, the flashy players, the guys that make plays, the edge rushers. But without Caden McDonald's presence, are these guys put in the best position to succeed? The answer to that is no. Caden McDonald consistently put Ohio State in favorable 2nd and 3rd down situations, and that is what the best defensive tackles, the best nose tackles in football do. They make your run defense so good that on passing downs, edge rushers pin the ears back, corners play a little bit deep, safeties know your spot, and set you up in a favorable 3rd down and distance. Caden McDonald consistently did that for Ohio State, while even going an extra mile. 3 sacks from the nose tackle position is really good, man. 2 forced fumbles, really good. Again, do I think of him as a pass rusher at the NFL level? No, but I think of him as the central piece of an NFL team's run defense. And when I think about the teams that could use that, Chicago, Buffalo, San Francisco, hell, even Houston could take this guy and add him to that defense would be absolutely gross. Caden McDonald, my number 1 ranked defensive tackle, a real solid throwback nose tackle that should go at least at the end of the 1st round in the NFL draft. At number 2 is a player that I absolutely love, and that is Lee Hunter out of Texas Tech, a guy that I think probably should sniff his way into the 1st round after Caden McDonald goes to one of those other teams. And again, if I'm Buffalo and Caden McDonald just went to Chicago, I'd have no problem taking Lee Hunter. The same could be said for San Francisco and Houston. His physical profile, 6'3", 318 pounds, a big boy in there, 9 1/4 hands, arm length 33 1/4, really good physical traits. That arm length is really impressive, especially from the defensive tackle, but again, when engaged in blocks, gives you just that extra bit of length to get out there and make some plays, and he made them last year. 44 tackles, 2.5 sacks, a forced fumble. His PFF grade was 80.5, and again, another nose tackle in this draft that I'm really excited about. Is Lee Hunter going to rush the quarterback and run up the sack numbers from the defensive tackle position the way maybe a Jalen Carter does? No, that's just not going to happen in this draft class with these guys. However, I do think the effect that he could have makes him a first round talent. And I don't see him going in the first round in a lot of drafts. So maybe you could call Lee Hunter one of my guys. I don't think he's quite as strong as McDonald against the run, but I do think that he's more likely to have success as a pass rusher than McDonald is. So, you know, like Daniel Jeremiah says, this is a flavors draft. I think Lee Hunter on an aggressive Texans defense could be really interesting, whereas maybe Caden McDonald, more reserved for a Buffalo Bills defense that really needs a run stopper, could be something super interesting. You know, it's not to take away from David Bailey, but like I mentioned, defensive tackles set up positions for edge rushers to be successful. Lee Hunter consistently set up David Bailey for success at Texas Tech. David Bailey led the nation in sacks, and yes, a lot of that has to do with the talent that David Bailey himself possesses. But a lot of that has to do with the situations that Texas Tech defense found itself in, and Lee Hunter is a big reason for that. He is an asset to a defense in a similar way that edge rushers are. He makes the edge rushers' lives easier and sets them up for success. Like I mentioned, similar to McDonald, I love Chicago, Buffalo, Houston, and San Francisco. At the top of my defensive tackle rankings are just two really strong, really good nose tackles. And then we got Christian Miller out of Georgia, a guy that I haven't seen much talk about, but a guy that I think is going to be really good in this league. And if you get him in the second round, might just be one of the steals, one of the gems of the draft. Physically 6'4", 321 pounds, 10-inch paws, arm length 33 inches. The dude is just built like a monster. What else do you expect from a defensive player out of Georgia at this point? Last year, statistically pretty solid, 23 tackles, 1.5 sacks, an 82.3 PFF grade. A guy who I felt like was just always in the right place watching the tape. Really good at staying in his gap and protecting that zone, whether it's making the tackle on the running back coming in, making the tackle on the quarterback trying to slip his way through the interior of the defensive line, or just driving those guys a different direction so somebody else on the defensive line could make a play, whether that's a linebacker or an edge rusher. I wouldn't call Miller specifically dominant in either category, but a player that I believe could stay on the field for first through fourth down if you needed him to. His versatility and his ability to win as a pass rusher and run defender, I think is going to make him an asset for teams. And for a defensive scheme, maybe like the Houston Texans, where like they like to have groups and transition guys, and you know, he could find his way onto the field in a plethora of ways. There are some questions about how he holds up against better interior offensive linemen. Kind of struggled in the Tennessee game, so hey, it's why I have him knocked down a peg from the top two guys. But Christian Miller, I do believe with his intangibles and the fact that he went to Georgia, was a good piece of a Kirby Smart defense, does deserve some respect on his name. And if you unlock him to the full potential, I do think there's a possibility he is one of, if not the best defensive tackles in this class, just because of how much I believe he could play on both downs. Again, man, at the end of round one, would I be mad about it? No, but I think day two is more of a spot for him, but you're getting a really quality player. At number 4, this is where I have Caleb Banks out of Florida, and Caleb Banks is one of the more interesting prospects, man, because I think there's a world where he is easily, and I mean easily, the best defensive tackle in this class. I also think there's a world that after year 2, he's not getting play, he's on the bench and just a physical specimen. We really don't know how it's going to pan out for Banks, and we start with the physical profile, which is super impressive. 6'6", 327 pounds, hands 10 7/8 inches, arm length, pay attention to this, 35 inches, man. Just massive arms, huge size of the defensive line, can easily bat down passes from that defensive tackle position. Going to be really hard for shorter quarterbacks to see over his head and throw across the middle of the field. Banks is just really built, super solid physically. The problem is he has a bit of an injury history. In 2025, he only played 2 games, so it's hard to take a look at his stats from that year. 2024, in 8 games, he did have 21 tackles, 4.5 sacks from the defensive tackle position, and a forced fumble. Again, there's a freaky size and a freaky profile there. And at his best, you could argue that Banks is the #1 defensive tackle in this class. The question with Banks is, how often are you going to get him at his best, and how often are you going to get him on the field? And I think that's something that these NFL GMs are really going to have to consider, because if there was no injury history, one, I think he'd be the first defensive tackle taken, but two, I think he'd be a no-doubt first rounder. But now the way that I look at it, it's, do you want to spend your first round pick as an NFL general manager on a guy that you're not sure is going to get to play for you? And even when he does, you don't know how long he's going to stay out there. That is the injury risk that these guys have to be willing to take. And for me, there's just better defensive tackles in this class to invest in that could have better ceilings. Now, I do think it's admirable that Banks came back in 2025. He really probably didn't have to, but he wanted to play with his teammates. That's why he wasn't the best when he did come back. But it is admirable and shows a good team ethic, a good team player to come back and play in that spot. And so when this dude's right, he absolutely moves the line. There's no denying it. And you go back, you watch the 2024 film, you see the flashes, you see the, whoa, this dude could be special. It is there. I'm not going to deny it. But I have him at 4 because it's just a little bit too risky for me when McDonald, Hunter, and to an extent Miller are guys that I believe can be consistent, high-level, quality players for a defensive line. And then number 5, I have Peter Woods out of Clemson, who I'm seeing a lot of mixed reviews on, but I'm seeing people that have him as high as their #1 defensive tackle in the class. And personally, I'm just not there with Peter Woods. When you look at the physical profile, not as great as some of the other guys. 6'3", 298 pounds, 9 1/8 inch hands, 31 1/4 length arms. Nothing that really jumps completely off the page to me for the defensive tackle position. How did he hold up statistically? 30 tackles, 2 sacks, and a PFF grade of 72.5. I'm not sure if people are just drafting this guy off of athletic traits, because don't get me wrong, for a defensive tackle, this guy has freaky athletic ability. Probably a guy that you could play on the outside if you ever needed to kick him out there, and there is some versatility to his game. More of an athlete, but Daniel Jeremiah does call this a flavors draft. And maybe if a team is looking for an athletic defensive tackle that they could play on passing downs, Peter Woods fits more of their scheme. But for me, when I think of defensive tackle, I think of the big body guy in the middle. And I think of, a nose tackle, but even Jalen Carter, who we talked about earlier on the Eagles, he's the more athletic type. Jordan Davis is obviously the big body run stopper, but Jalen Carter, he's got some domination on that line that I didn't quite see out of Peter Woods. His best plays in the season were on third down, were on passing downs, and that's cool. Getting more of a pass rusher at the defensive tackle position is fine, but I want my guy to be able to be dominant on rundowns. The interior line is for that for me. If I want the pass rush pressure, give me an edge rusher. And Peter Woods is a good pick, and I think he could be a good rotational piece on a defensive line. But these other guys that I have above him, I think they could be downs 1 through 3. Peter Woods, though, also does have some upside as a goal line runner. Again, we talked about the athletic ability that he had. Short yardage runner last year for Clemson, 8 for 15 and 2 touchdowns. Again, to me, more of a day 2 pick, more of a rotational player. Not a bad guy, but I feel like there's people that are pushing him up into the first round, and I just don't quite see it. Maybe I'm missing something. If you think so, let me know in the comment section. So those are my top 5 rankings. Let's jump into a tier list and kind of break it down a little bit further. Hayden McDonald and Lee Hunter are in tier 1 for me. I think you could alternate them, flip-flop them. I went with McDonald just because of his production being a little bit higher than Lee Hunter's, but I really do think both of these guys are going to be quality starters. Christian Miller's in a tier of his own because I do think he could potentially pop up to being at the level that I view McDonald and Hunter, but I'm not quite there with him yet. However, if those 2 defensive tackles were gone, Miller is easily the guy that I would invest in. And then in the third tier, I have Banks and Woods. This is kind of more of a potential tier. Banks, the potential to stay healthy. Woods, the potential to develop him even further. The interior defensive line is one of the more underrated positions in the 2026 NFL draft. I do think there are some first round caliber guys there that are going to make big impacts on the future. And there's some big interesting prospects in Banks and Woods that I'm really interested to see how their careers develop. As always, let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below, and I will catch you next time. Peace.